The morning my diesel generator first rumbled to life in my backyard, I had no idea it would become the most controversial machine in all of Pinewood Heights, Georgia. My name is Victor Lawson, and I am a 42-year-old software engineer who works from home. I had just purchased this beautiful 3-bedroom house in what I thought would be a peaceful suburban neighborhood outside Atlanta. The place seemed perfect at first. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, friendly neighbors waving as they walked their dogs. What I did not know was that the Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association was run by a woman who made dictators look reasonable. The power outages started in late February. Georgia Power had been doing maintenance work on the grid, and my street kept losing electricity for hours at a time. When you work in tech and need to maintain servers and attend video conferences, unreliable power is not just an inconvenience. It is a threat to your livelihood. So I did what any rational person would do. I bought a backup generator. It was not some cheap little portable unit. I invested in a proper diesel-powered generator that could run my entire house. The thing cost me nearly $8,000, but it was worth every penny for the peace of mind. I had it professionally installed in my backyard, properly grounded, with all the necessary permits from the county. Everything was completely legal and above board. The first time I actually needed to use it was on a Tuesday morning in March. The power went out at 8 in the morning, right before an important client meeting. I went outside, started up the generator, and within minutes my house was humming along with electricity. The meeting went perfectly. I felt like a genius for having the foresight to install this thing. That afternoon, I received my first visit from Patricia Morrison. Patricia was the president of the Pinewood Heights HOA, and she looked exactly like what you would imagine when you hear the term HOA Karen. She was probably in her early 50s, with that specific haircut that seemed to defy both gravity and good taste. She wore a pantsuit despite the warm Georgia weather and carried a leather-bound folder that I would soon learn contained every single HOA rule ever written. I opened my front door to find her standing there with her arms crossed, her face twisted into an expression of profound displeasure. "Mr. Lawson, I presume?" she said without any greeting. "That is me. Can I help you?" "I am Patricia Morrison, president of the Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association. I need to speak with you about the noise disturbance you created this morning." I blinked. "Noise disturbance? You mean my generator?" "Yes, your excessively loud generator," she said, pronouncing each word like she was explaining something to a particularly slow child. It was audible from 3 houses away. "This is a residential neighborhood, Mr. Lawson. We have noise ordinances." "The power was out," I explained. "I need electricity to work. That is why I installed the generator." Patricia flipped open her folder. According to Section 7.3 of the Pinewood Heights HOA bylaws, any mechanical device that produces noise exceeding 65 decibels at the property line requires written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Did you obtain such approval? I was not aware I needed HOA approval. I got all the permits from the county. County permits are irrelevant. You live in an HOA community. Our rules supersede county regulations in matters of aesthetics and community standards. That last part seemed legally dubious to me, but I was not looking to start a war on my first encounter with the HOA president. "Okay, so what do I need to do?" "Submit an application." "You can submit one, but I should warn you that generators are typically denied unless they are completely inaudible from neighboring properties. I suggest you invest in a quieter model or simply deal with power outages like everyone else." Deal with power outages. I work from home. I cannot just sit in the dark when the power goes out. Patricia gave me a smile that did not reach her eyes. "That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Lawson. Good day." She turned and walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking on my driveway with sharp, aggressive taps. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I went inside and did what any modern person does when confronted with bureaucratic nonsense. I researched. What I found was disturbing. The Pinewood Heights HOA had a reputation. Online forums were filled with complaints from current and former residents. There were stories about people being fined for having the wrong shade of mailbox, for planting flowers that were not on the approved list, for parking their cars in their own driveways for more than 24 hours. Patricia Morrison's name appeared again and again, always at the center of the most absurd enforcement actions. One guy had been fined $500 because his grass was a quarter-inch taller than the maximum allowed height. Another woman received a violation notice because she hung an American flag without getting prior written approval. The HOA had threatened to foreclose on her house over it, until local news picked up the story and public outrage forced them to back down. But the generator issue kept nagging at me. I had checked the HOA bylaws before buying the house. I had even read through that dense document looking for any restrictions on home improvements. There was nothing specific about generators. Section 7.3 that Patricia mentioned was vaguely worded and seemed designed to be interpreted however the board wanted. I decided to follow the proper channels anyway. I filled out an architectural review committee application, provided specifications for my generator, included a sound level report from the manufacturer showing it produced around 75 decibels at 3 feet, and submitted everything through the HOA's online portal. 2 weeks later, I received their response. Application denied. The reason given was excessive noise and visual impact on community aesthetics. Never mind that my generator was in my backyard, barely visible from the street, and only ran when the power was out. Never mind that it was quieter than most lawn mowers. The application was denied, and I was ordered to remove the generator within 30 days or face daily fines of $100. I called an HOA attorney. Her name was Diane Chen, and she had a practice in Atlanta specializing in homeowner disputes. After reviewing my case, she gave me the hard truth. "Technically, they are probably within their rights," she said over the phone. HOA bylaws give the board broad discretion over anything that could impact property values or community standards. Unless you can prove they are being discriminatory or acting in bad faith, fighting this could cost you more in legal fees than the generator is worth. So what are my options? You could appeal to the board, but from what you have told me about Patricia Morrison, I doubt that will work. You could try to get other homeowners to pressure the board, maybe recall her if you can get enough votes. Or you could just comply and remove the generator. And when the power goes out, buy a battery backup system. Get a quieter inverter generator, work from a coffee shop. She paused. "Look, Mr. Lawson, I know this is frustrating, but sometimes with HOAs you have to pick your battles. This Patricia person sounds like she thrives on conflict. If you push back too hard, she will make your life miserable in 100 other ways." I thanked her for her time and hung up. Then I sat at my desk and stared at my generator through the window. I had paid $8,000 for that machine. It was properly installed, fully permitted by the county, and absolutely necessary for my work. And some power-hungry HOA president thought she could force me to remove it because it offended her sense of suburban uniformity. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Then the power went out again. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was in the middle of deploying code to a production server. The kind of thing you absolutely cannot have interrupted. When my monitors went dark, I actually shouted in frustration. I had 20 minutes before my backup battery would die and potentially corrupt data. I ran outside and fired up the generator. The diesel engine coughed to life, and within seconds, my house had power again. I rushed back inside and finished the deployment with minutes to spare. Crisis averted. 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. It was Patricia again, but this time she had brought backup. A tall, stern-looking man in khakis and a polo shirt stood beside her. "Mr. Lawson," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "This is Derek Hughes, our HOA compliance officer. We are here to inform you that you are in direct violation of your denial notice. You were explicitly instructed not to operate that generator." "The power was out," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I was in the middle of critical work." Derek stepped forward. "Sir, you received an official denial of your application. Operating a denied device constitutes a willful violation of HOA regulations. We are issuing you a citation for $100 for today's violation. Each subsequent violation will result in another $100 fine." "You cannot be serious. You expect me to just lose power and potentially lose my job. We expect you to follow the rules you agreed to when you purchased your home," Patricia said. "Every homeowner in Pinewood Heights signed a covenant agreeing to abide by HOA regulations." "You are not special, Mr. Lawson. The rules apply to everyone. Show me one other person who has been denied a generator." "That is confidential information," Patricia said quickly, too quickly. "Because there is not anyone else, is there? You are singling me out." Derek handed me an envelope. "This is your official citation. Payment is due within 10 business days. Have a nice day, sir." They left, and I stood there holding the envelope, my hands shaking with anger. That night I could not sleep. I kept running through scenarios in my head. I could remove the generator, but that would mean accepting defeat and potentially jeopardizing my work whenever the power went out. I could keep using it and rack up fines, but at $100 a day, that would get expensive fast. I could try to rally other homeowners, but that would take time I did not have. Then, at about 3 in the morning, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, an idea came to me. It was petty. It was probably immature. But it was also, technically, completely within the rules. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the Pinewood Heights HOA website. Under the Meetings section, I found what I was looking for. The HOA board held public meetings on the first Thursday of every month at 7 in the evening. The meetings were held in the community clubhouse, which was, conveniently, located right across the street from my house. I checked the HOA bylaws again, this time looking at sections about property usage. Section 5.7 stated that homeowners had the right to operate necessary equipment on their property during reasonable hours, defined as 7 in the morning to 10 at night. Section 7.3, the one Patricia kept citing, said that loud mechanical devices required approval, but it did not actually prohibit their use during the application process or appeals. A smile spread across my face. If Patricia wanted to play games with technicalities, two could play at that game. The next day, I drafted an appeal of the Architectural Review Committee's decision. I cited every relevant section of the bylaws, included additional documentation about my generator's sound levels, and submitted it through the proper channels. According to the bylaws, the board had to hear my appeal at their next public meeting. The first Thursday in April arrived. I waited until 6:50 in the evening, then I went into my backyard and started my generator. The diesel engine rumbled to life, its deep thrumming audible across the street where the HOA board meeting was about to begin. I did not need the generator. The power was working fine. But Section 5.7 said I had the right to operate necessary equipment during reasonable hours, and who was to say what I deemed necessary? Maybe I was testing it. Maybe I was breaking it in. Maybe I just wanted to make sure it would work properly when I needed it. I grabbed a lawn chair, a cold beer, and sat in my backyard, watching the community clubhouse across the street. Through the windows, I could see Patricia and the other board members arriving. They settled into their seats at the long table at the front of the room. A few other homeowners trickled in for the meeting. At exactly 7, Patricia called the meeting to order. I could not hear what she was saying over the sound of my generator, but I could see her mouth moving. Then she paused, her head turned toward my house. Even from across the street, I could see the expression on her face change from professional courtesy to absolute fury. She said something to Derek, who jumped up from his seat and rushed out of the clubhouse. I watched him hurry across the street toward my house. I stayed exactly where I was, sitting in my lawn chair, sipping my beer. Derek appeared at my fence gate, his face red. "Mr. Lawson, what do you think you are doing?" "Testing my generator," I said calmly, "making sure it works properly. You need to turn that off right now. We are trying to hold a meeting. I am operating necessary equipment on my property during reasonable hours, as permitted by Section 5.7 of the HOA bylaws. Is there a problem? You know exactly what you are doing. This is harassment. Harassment. I am simply maintaining my property. The bylaws do not say I have to coordinate my maintenance schedule around HOA meetings." Derek stood there for a moment, his jaw working like he was chewing through the words he wanted to say but could not. Finally, he turned and marched back to the clubhouse. Through the windows, I watched him talk to Patricia. Her face was turning interesting shades of red. She gestured angrily, clearly giving him instructions. He shook his head at something she said. They argued for a moment, then Patricia abruptly stood up and announced something to the room. The other homeowners started filing out of the clubhouse. Patricia had apparently adjourned the meeting. As the residents left, several of them looked toward my house, and I could have sworn a couple of them were smiling. Patricia herself stormed out last, her leather folder clutched to her chest like armor. She did not come to my house, though. She got in her silver Lexus and peeled out of the parking lot faster than the 15-mile-per-hour speed limit the HOA strictly enforced. I turned off my generator and went inside, feeling better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA. My appeal had been added to the agenda for next month's meeting. They also, helpfully, reminded me that my $100 citation was still unpaid and now included a $20 late fee. I paid the fine. Then I marked my calendar for the first Thursday in May. The weeks between meetings were relatively quiet. I used my generator only when the power actually went out, which happened twice. Each time, I received a $100 citation in my mailbox the next day. I paid them without comment, keeping careful documentation of everything. I also did something else. I started talking to my neighbors. The house to my right was owned by a retired couple, Frank and Doris Patterson. They had lived in Pinewood Heights for 15 years and had their own horror stories about the HOA. Frank had been threatened with foreclosure because he built a shed 6 inches taller than the maximum allowed height. The fact that the shed was in his backyard, completely invisible from any street, did not matter. He had eventually been forced to literally cut the top off his shed and rebuild it lower. To my left lived a younger couple, Marco and Jennifer Torres, with 2 small kids. Jennifer had received a violation notice because her children's play equipment was the wrong color. The plastic slide was blue, and the HOA architectural standards specified that play equipment must be earth tones only. She had to repaint a plastic slide or face daily fines. Behind my house lived a single mother named Rachel Kim. She worked as a nurse and kept odd hours. The HOA had cited her multiple times for putting out her trash cans more than 12 hours before pickup, even though her shifts meant she often had to leave them out early or miss the pickup entirely. The stories went on and on. Nearly every homeowner I talked to had been targeted by Patricia's enforcement regime at some point, but they all felt powerless to do anything about it. Most of the neighborhood did not even attend the monthly meetings. Patricia and her board ran Pinewood Heights like their personal fiefdom, and most residents had given up trying to fight back. "Why do you not vote her out?" I asked Frank one afternoon, while he was trimming his precisely HOA-approved hedge. "We tried once, about 5 years back," he said, shaking his head. "But Patricia and her friends control the proxy votes. See, most people do not show up to the annual meeting when we elect board members. The bylaws say you can submit a proxy giving someone else your vote. Patricia goes around collecting proxies from anyone who will sign them, promising she will vote in their best interest. Then she uses those proxies to keep herself and her allies on the board. That cannot be legal." "It is. We checked. As long as the proxy forms are properly signed, they are valid, and most people just sign them to get Patricia to leave them alone. They do not realize she is using those signatures to maintain power." "What if we got more people to actually show up to the meeting?" Frank gave me a sad smile. "Good luck with that, son. People around here have learned to keep their heads down and hope Patricia does not notice them." But Frank's words stuck with me. The annual meeting was in November, 7 months away. That was when board positions were up for election. If I could get enough homeowners engaged, we could potentially vote Patricia out. But that was a long-term solution, and I needed to deal with the generator issue now. The first Thursday in May arrived. I spent the day preparing. I printed out copies of all my documentation, the county permits, the manufacturer's specifications, photos showing how the generator was barely visible from the street, sound level measurements I had taken at various distances, a letter from my employer explaining that I needed reliable power to work from home. At 6:45, I went outside and started my generator. This time, I was not subtle about it. I pulled my lawn chair to the front yard where I could see the clubhouse clearly. I had my folder of documents, another beer, and a determination to make my point. The board members started arriving. Patricia pulled up in her Lexus, saw me sitting there with my generator running, and I watched her entire body go rigid. She marched into the clubhouse without looking in my direction. Other homeowners started showing up for the meeting. More than last month, I noticed. Word had apparently spread about what I had done. A few people waved at me as they went inside. One guy, a man in his 30s I had not met before, actually gave me a thumbs up. 7 o'clock arrived. Through the clubhouse windows, I could see Patricia standing at the podium, clearly agitated. She kept gesturing toward my house. Derek was setting up some kind of sound meter, pointing it in my direction. Another board member, a nervous-looking woman named Susan something, was taking notes. The meeting went on for about 20 minutes. I could not hear anything over my generator, but I could see Patricia getting more and more worked up. Then Derek came outside again, this time carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Lawson," he said when he reached my property line, "I am here to formally measure the sound level of your generator in accordance with HOA Section 7.3. "Go ahead," I said. He held up his sound meter and took several readings. I already knew what it would show. My generator produced about 75 to 80 decibels at 20 feet, which was louder than the 65 decibel threshold in the bylaws. Of course, That threshold was arbitrary and probably unenforceable, since it was quieter than a normal conversation and much quieter than a lawn mower, but Derek did not care about that. "Readings confirm excessive noise levels," he announced, making a note on his clipboard. "You are being cited for another violation. Make sure you note that I am operating during permitted hours under Section 5.7, I said. "That section does not override noise restrictions. The bylaws do not actually say that anywhere. Section 5.7 permits operation of necessary equipment. Section 7.3 requires approval for installation, but does not prohibit use during the appeals process. I have an active appeal pending, which means my generator's status is currently under review, not definitively denied." Derek stared at me. "You are twisting the rules." "I am reading them exactly as written. If they are poorly worded, maybe the board should revise them." He made another note and stalked back to the clubhouse. Through the windows, I watched Patricia's face as Derek delivered his report. If looks could kill, I would have been incinerated on the spot. The meeting continued. My appeal was supposedly on the agenda, but I had no intention of going inside to present it while my generator ran outside. Let them hear my case with the same soundtrack I was providing. After another 40 minutes, Patricia apparently had enough. She adjourned the meeting early again. The homeowners filed out, and this time several of them came over to talk to me. "That was beautiful," said the guy who had given me a thumbs up earlier. His name was Tyler, and he lived 3 streets over. "Patricia has been making everyone's lives miserable for years. It is about time someone stood up to her. She cited my wife for hanging the wrong color Christmas lights," said another man. "In June. We had forgotten to take them down, and she slapped us with a $500 fine for having decorations up outside the permitted holiday season." "What happened with your appeal?" asked Jennifer Torres, who had walked over with her husband. "They did not hear it," I said. "Meeting was too loud, I guess," Jennifer laughed. "So they will have to schedule it for next month. According to the bylaws, they have to hear appeals within 60 days of filing. I filed in early April, so they have until early June. If they do not hear it by then, the denial is automatically overturned." "Where does it say that?" Tyler asked. I pulled out my copy of the bylaws and showed him Section 9.2, which outlined the appeals process. Most homeowners had never actually read the document in detail. It was 70 pages of dense legalese, designed to be intimidating and confusing, but I had read every word multiple times. "This is good to know," Tyler said, taking a photo of the page with his phone. "Real good to know." The group dispersed eventually, and I turned off my generator and went inside. I felt energized in a way I had not in years. Working from home could be isolating, and I had not realized how much I missed being part of a community. Granted, this was a community united by frustration with an overbearing HOA president, but still. The next day, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney. It was filled with legal threats about harassment, disturbing the peace, and malicious interference with HOA operations. They demanded I cease and desist from running my generator during board meetings or face legal action. I called Deanne Chen again. "They do not have a case," she said after I read her the letter. "You are operating equipment on your property during permitted hours. The fact that those hours coincide with their meetings is not illegal. If anything, this letter helps your case because it shows they are retaliating against you for exercising your rights as a homeowner. So I can keep doing it. Technically, yes. But Victor, I have to ask, what is your end game here? You are making a point, sure, but this is not solving your generator problem. Eventually, they are going to find some way to nail you. Patricia Morrison does not sound like someone who gives up." The end game is making their lives difficult enough that they approve my generator just to make me go away. Or they double down and make your life so miserable that you are forced to sell and leave. She had a point, but I had already committed to this path, and I was not backing down now. The first Thursday in June arrived. I had received 2 more citations for using my generator during actual power outages. The fines were adding up. I had paid about $600 so far, plus another $200 in late fees because I had started paying slowly just to annoy them. At 6:45, I started my generator, but this time I had made some modifications. The generator sat on a concrete pad in my backyard. I had built a wooden frame around it, not to enclose it, but to mount some additional items. Specifically, I had attached strings of LED lights that pulsed in time with the engine rhythm. I had also positioned a large mirror to reflect the lights toward the clubhouse windows. It was obnoxious and petty and absolutely hilarious. I also invited people over. Frank and Doris came. Marco and Jennifer brought their kids. Rachel showed up after her shift. Tyler came with his wife. I set up folding chairs in my front yard and put out snacks and drinks. If Patricia wanted to make my generator use into a public spectacle, I would give her a spectacle. The board members arrived for their meeting and found about 15 homeowners having a party in my front yard with a disco-lit generator providing the soundtrack. Patricia's face when she pulled up was absolutely priceless. She stormed out of her car and marched toward us, but she stopped at the property line. Even Patricia knew better than to trespass, especially with this many witnesses. "What do you think you are doing?" she shouted over the generator noise. "Having a gathering of homeowners," I shouted back. Section 6.4 permits social gatherings on private property without prior approval as long as they end by 10 at night. We are just enjoying a nice evening together. This is a deliberate attempt to disrupt HOA business. No, madam. This is homeowners exercising their rights under the bylaws you are supposed to uphold. If our gathering happens to be audible during your meeting, well, that is just unfortunate timing. You will be hearing from our attorney. Looking forward to it. Patricia spun around and stomped into the clubhouse. Through the windows, we could see her gesturing frantically at the other board members. Derek looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Susan was shaking her head. The other 2 board members, whose names I had learned were Harold and Margaret, looked more confused than anything. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. Patricia could not conduct business with the noise, and she clearly was not willing to stay long enough to outlast us. She adjourned early again, and as the board members filed out, Harold actually stopped by. "Mr. Lawson," he said, and he looked tired. "I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how Patricia has handled this situation. But she controls the votes, and frankly, most of us just do not want to deal with her anger if we disagree. Why stay on the board then? Because if people like me leave, people like her have complete control. At least this way I can sometimes slow her down." He glanced back at the clubhouse. "Your appeal is on the agenda for our executive session next week. I cannot promise anything, but I will make sure your documentation is actually reviewed this time." "I appreciate that." Harold nodded and left. The party in my yard continued for another hour. People shared their own HOA horror stories. Tyler talked about organizing for the November election. Jennifer suggested creating a neighborhood email list to keep everyone informed about HOA issues. For the first time since moving to Pinewood Heights, I felt like I was part of an actual community, rather than just a collection of houses governed by arbitrary rules. The executive session Harold mentioned was scheduled for the following Wednesday. It was not a public meeting, just the board members reviewing appeals and other administrative matters. I was not invited to attend, but I submitted additional written materials through the HOA portal. Wednesday came and went with no word. Then Thursday. On Friday afternoon, I received an email. Dear Mr. Lawson, after careful review of your appeal and supporting documentation, the Pinewood Heights HOA Architectural Review Committee has decided to uphold the denial of your generator application. However, in recognition of your work from home requirements, the board is willing to approve a temporary variance allowing generator use only during documented power outages, provided that such use does not exceed 4 hours per incident and occurs no more than twice per week. This variance will be reviewed in 6 months. Any use outside these parameters will result in citation and fines as previously specified. I read the email 3 times. It was not a complete victory. The restrictions they were imposing were ridiculous. Power outages did not follow a schedule, and limiting me to twice per week was arbitrary. But it was movement. They had blinked first. I replied declining the variance offer and requested a formal hearing before the full board with all homeowners invited to attend. According to Section 9.3 of the bylaws, I had that right if I rejected a settlement offer. Patricia responded within an hour. Your request for a formal hearing is acknowledged. The hearing will be scheduled at the next available board meeting. Be advised that if the board's decision is upheld at the hearing, your appeal rights will be exhausted, and you will be required to comply immediately or face accelerated fines of $500 per day. $500 per day. She was escalating. I forwarded all the correspondence to Deanne Chen. She called me back within the hour. Victor, this is getting serious. $500 a day could mean foreclosure proceedings within months if you do not pay. They can put a lien on your house. Can they actually do that? Unfortunately, yes. HOAs have broad powers to enforce their rules, including the ability to foreclose on properties with unpaid fines. It does not happen often because the negative publicity is terrible, but Patricia Morrison sounds vindictive enough to try it. So what do I do? You have 2 options. Accept some version of their variance, even if it is not ideal, and work within those limits. Or you go to the formal hearing and make your case to the full board in front of other homeowners. If you can rally enough community support, you might pressure them into a better compromise. I am going with option 2. I figured you would say that. Do you want me to represent you at the hearing? How much would that cost? My retainer for HOA disputes starts at $5,000. I thought about it. I had already spent $600 on fines, $8,000 on the generator, and now potentially $5,000 on a lawyer. This was getting expensive, but principles sometimes are. Let me think about it, I said. When would the hearing be? Based on what you have told me, probably at their July meeting. That gives you about a month to prepare. We hung up, and I sat down to strategize. I needed to make this count. If I lost the hearing, I was facing massive fines or having to remove my generator entirely. If I won, I would not only solve my own problem but potentially establish a precedent that could help other homeowners stand up to Patricia's overreach. The next few weeks were busy. I created a presentation for the hearing with photos, documentation, sound measurements, and legal research. I met with neighbors and encouraged them to attend the July meeting. Tyler took it upon himself to create a Facebook group for Pinewood Heights residents to discuss HOA issues, and within a week, it had over 100 members sharing their stories. The complaints against Patricia were numerous and damning. Someone had been fined for having a garden gnome that was not on the approved decorations list. Another person had been cited for having guests park on the street overnight during a family visit. A retired veteran had been threatened with legal action for flying his Marine Corps flag without approval. Reading these stories made me realize this was bigger than just my generator. Patricia had been abusing her position for years, making life miserable for dozens of families, all in the name of maintaining property values and upholding community standards. On July 1st, 3 days before the scheduled hearing, I received another certified letter. This one was not from the HOA attorney. It was from Patricia herself, and it was marked personal and confidential. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mr. Lawson, I believe we have gotten off on the wrong foot. I am not an unreasonable person, despite what you may think. I am willing to meet with you privately to discuss a resolution to this generator matter. I think we can find a compromise that works for everyone without the need for a contentious public hearing. Please call me at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting." It included her personal phone number. I showed the letter to Frank, who had become something of an informal advisor through this process. "It is a trap," he said immediately. "She wants to get you alone, make some promises she has no intention of keeping, and get you to withdraw your hearing request. Then she will come after you twice as hard for embarrassing her. You really think she would do that? I know she would. She tried the same thing with me during my shed situation. Promised she could get the board to approve a variance if I just withdrew my appeal. I was dumb enough to believe her. Soon as I withdrew, she hit me with the maximum fines and threatened foreclosure. I ended up cutting my shed down just to make it stop." I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. No private meetings. Everything would be done in public, on the record, where Patricia could not make promises she would not keep. The first Thursday in July was hot and humid, typical Georgia summer weather. I started my generator at 6:30, earlier than usual. I wanted to make sure it was warmed up and running smoothly for the meeting. This time, I did not set up a party in my yard. This was serious. I needed to be professional and credible for the hearing. I dressed in business casual, gathered my presentation materials, and at 6:50 I walked across the street to the clubhouse. The parking lot was packed. I had never seen this many people at an HOA meeting. Every spot was full, and cars lined the street. As I approached the entrance, I saw why. Tyler had done an incredible job promoting the meeting in the Facebook group. Dozens of homeowners had come out to support me, or at least to watch the show. Inside, the clubhouse meeting room was set up with the board table at the front and rows of folding chairs facing it. Every seat was taken, and people stood along the walls. The energy in the room was electric. Patricia sat at the center of the board table, flanked by Derek, Susan, Harold, and Margaret. When I walked in, her eyes locked onto me with barely concealed fury. "Mr. Lawson," she said coldly, "please take a seat. The board will call you forward when we are ready to hear your case." I found a spot standing along the side wall. Frank gave me an encouraging nod from his seat. Jennifer and Marco were there with their kids. Rachel waved from the back. Tyler stood near the door with his phone out, recording everything. Patricia called the meeting to order and started with routine business. Minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, discussion of landscaping contracts. She was clearly trying to bore everyone into leaving, drawing out the mundane stuff to delay my hearing. But nobody left. If anything, the crowd grew more restless, people shifting in their seats and murmuring. After 45 minutes of procedural nonsense, Patricia finally said, "We will now move to the matter of Victor Lawson's generator appeal. Mr. Lawson, please come forward." I walked to the front of the room and set up my laptop to connect to the projector. Patricia looked annoyed that I had prepared a presentation, but she could not object without looking petty. "Members of the board," I began, projecting confidence I did not entirely feel. "I am here tonight to appeal the denial of my generator application. I would like to present evidence showing that my generator is properly installed, legally permitted, necessary for my work, and does not violate any reasonable interpretation of the HOA bylaws. I went through my presentation methodically. Photos showing the generator's location in my backyard, barely visible from any neighboring property. County permits proving it met all local regulations. Sound measurements showing it was quieter than many common household devices. A letter from my employer explaining that reliable power was essential for my remote work. Then, I showed examples from other HOAs in Georgia that had approved similar generators with reasonable restrictions. Some required sound dampening enclosures. Others limited operating hours or required advance notice to neighbors. All of these were sensible compromises that balanced homeowner needs with community concerns. What the board offered me was not a reasonable compromise, I continued. Limiting me to twice per week, 4 hours per incident during documented power outages only, that is not addressing my actual needs. Power outages do not follow a schedule. If we have a week of storms and lose power 5 times, your proposed variance would leave me unable to work for more than half of those outages. Patricia interrupted. Mr. Lawson, the board's offer was more than generous considering that your generator violates our noise standards. Perhaps if you had installed a quieter model, we would not be having this discussion. My generator meets industry standards for residential use. It is no louder than the lawn mowers and leaf blowers that operate in this neighborhood every week, which are also not subject to HOA approval. The only difference is that those devices do not bother you personally. That is out of line, Patricia snapped. Is it? Because from where I am standing, this seems less about noise levels and more about control. You have denied my application not because my generator causes any actual harm, but because I did not ask your permission before installing it. This is about asserting power, not protecting the community. The room erupted in murmurs and scattered applause. Patricia banged her gavel. Order. I will have order in this meeting. Mr. Lawson, you will show respect for this board or you will be removed from the hearing. Harold, the board member who had spoken to me before, leaned forward. Patricia, let him finish his presentation. We agreed to hear his full case. Patricia glared at Harold but sat back. I continued. I am asking the board to approve my generator with reasonable restrictions. I will agree to only operate it during actual power outages or for brief monthly testing. I will install additional sound dampening if needed. I will provide advance notice when possible. But I need the board to acknowledge that my generator serves a legitimate purpose and is not some aesthetic nuisance to be banned because it does not fit someone's vision of suburban perfection. I closed my presentation and stood there, waiting. Patricia shuffled some papers. The board will now deliberate. Please return to your seat. The 5 board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. The conversation quickly became heated. I could see Margaret shaking her head at something Patricia said. Harold was gesturing emphatically. Susan looked like she wanted to disappear. Derek just sat there with his arms crossed, clearly backing whatever Patricia wanted. After about 10 minutes, Patricia broke from the huddle and addressed the room. The board has voted on Mr. Lawson's appeal. By a vote of 3-2, the appeal is denied. The original decision stands. Mr. Lawson must remove his generator within 30 days or face escalated fines of $500 per day. The room exploded. People were shouting, standing up, waving their hands for recognition. Tyler was yelling something about asking which board members voted which way. Jennifer was demanding they explain their reasoning. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone needs to leave now. But nobody moved. The crowd was angry and they were not backing down. Frank stood up. "Patricia, you cannot just deny his appeal without explanation. The bylaws require you to state your reasons on the record." "I do not have to explain anything to you, Frank. The decision is made." "Actually, you do," Harold said, and he looked furious. Section 9.3 requires written findings supporting any appeal denial. We have not drafted those findings yet. "We will do it after the meeting," Patricia said. "That is not how this works," Harold said, standing up. "And for the record, I voted to approve Victor's generator. So did Margaret." Patricia, Derek, and Susan voted to deny. The three of you just voted against a reasonable compromise because Patricia refuses to admit she was wrong. The crowd erupted again, this time in support of Harold. Patricia's face was bright red. "Harold, you are out of order." "I am adjourning this meeting." "No, Patricia, I am done. I am done watching you abuse your position. I am done watching you bully homeowners and twist the rules to serve your ego. I quit. I resign from this board effective immediately." He grabbed his papers and walked out. The room was stunned into silence. Margaret stood up next. "I quit too. This has gone too far." She followed Harold out, leaving Patricia, Derek, and Susan at the table. Tyler called out from the back. "Looks like you do not have a quorum anymore. 3 board members just became 2. You cannot conduct business without at least 3. Patricia looked stricken. The bylaws did require a minimum of 3 board members to vote on any official business. With Harold and Margaret gone, the board could not function. "This meeting is adjourned," Patricia said quietly. "We will schedule a special election to fill the vacant board seats." She gathered her things and hurried out a side door, with Derek and Susan following quickly behind. The crowd of homeowners erupted into chaotic conversation, everyone talking at once. Tyler made his way over to me. "That was incredible. I have never seen anyone make Patricia Morrison run away before." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we make sure the right people get elected to those open board seats, and we start recall proceedings against Patricia for the November meeting. We have got the momentum. We have got the people. We can actually change this place." Over the next few days, the Pinewood Heights Facebook group exploded with activity. Over 200 homeowners had joined, sharing stories and organizing. A petition started circulating to recall Patricia and the remaining board members who had voted against me. Within a week, it had signatures from over 60% of the homeowners. The special election was scheduled for early August. Tyler and 3 other homeowners put their names forward as candidates. I seriously considered running too, but I decided I could do more good as a resident advocate than as a board member dealing with the day-to-day administrative headaches. Patricia tried to fight back. She sent out an email blast to all homeowners claiming that a small group of troublemakers was trying to undermine the community's standards and property values. She warned that approving my generator would open the floodgates to all sorts of unsightly modifications that would turn Pinewood Heights into a slum. The email backfired spectacularly. People replied all with their own HOA horror stories, creating an email chain of hundreds of messages detailing Patricia's overreach. Someone leaked the whole exchange to a local news station, and suddenly Pinewood Heights HOA was in the news. A reporter named Jessica Chen, no relation to my attorney Deanne, showed up at my door one afternoon. "Mr. Lawson, I am doing a story about HOA overreach in suburban Atlanta. Your generator dispute has become somewhat infamous in local online communities. Would you be willing to go on camera?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to keep my head down and just let this blow over. But another part of me realized that publicity might actually help. "Sure," I said. "But I want to be clear that this is not just about my generator. This is about an HOA president who has been abusing her power for years and making life miserable for dozens of families. The interview aired 2 days later on the evening news. They showed my generator, interviewed me about the dispute, and then interviewed several other homeowners about their own problems with the HOA. Patricia declined to be interviewed, but they showed footage of her hurrying away from a camera crew at the clubhouse. The story went viral locally. By the next morning, 3 different news outlets had picked it up. A consumer advocacy lawyer reached out offering free legal representation. The Georgia HOA Ombudsman's Office opened an investigation into Pinewood Heights governance practices. Patricia went into full damage control mode. She announced that the board was reviewing all outstanding violations and would be offering amnesty for minor infractions. She personally called several homeowners to apologize for past enforcement actions. She even had Derek deliver a letter to my house saying the board was reconsidering my generator appeal, but it was too late. The special election happened on August 7th. Tyler and his slate of reform candidates won all 3 open seats by overwhelming margins. With Harold and Margaret still willing to serve and the 3 new members, the board now had a 5-person majority that was friendly to common-sense governance. Their first official act at the August regular meeting was to approve my generator with reasonable restrictions. Operate only during power outages or for monthly testing. Install a sound dampening enclosure within 60 days. Provide courtesy notice to immediate neighbors when possible. I accepted gladly. Their second act was to rescind all outstanding violations for minor infractions and establish a new review process for citations that included homeowner input. Over 40 families had violations dismissed that night. The recall petition against Patricia gained enough signatures to force a special vote at the November annual meeting. She tried to hang on, giving speeches about her years of service and her commitment to property values. But when the vote happened, she lost by a margin of 3-1. Patricia Morrison was removed as HOA president. Derek resigned the same night. Susan stayed on but was relegated to being secretary with no real power. Tyler was elected the new HOA president. One of his first initiatives was to completely rewrite the architectural review standards to be less restrictive and more reasonable. Another was to implement term limits for board positions so no one could accumulate power the way Patricia had. The community transformation was remarkable. The Facebook group became a hub for organizing neighborhood events. People who had been afraid to make improvements to their homes for fear of HOA retaliation started planting gardens, painting shutters, building decks. The neighborhood became more vibrant and diverse in appearance, and ironically, property values went up instead of down. My generator ran faithfully through several power outages that fall and winter. I installed a nice wooden enclosure around it that dampened the sound and made it less visually prominent. Nobody complained. In fact, a few neighbors asked me for recommendations when they decided to install their own backup power systems. In December, about 8 months after the whole saga started, I was sitting in my backyard on a mild winter afternoon when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia Morrison standing there. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing than I remembered. "Mr. Lawson," she said, and her voice was different too, less imperious, more tired. "I wanted to apologize. I was genuinely surprised." "Okay." I let the power go to my head. I convinced myself that I was protecting the community, that strict enforcement was necessary to maintain standards. But the truth is, I liked being in control. I liked that people had to come to me for approval, And when you challenged me, I took it personally instead of actually listening to what you needed. I appreciate you saying that. I am moving away. My husband got a job in Florida, and honestly, I am glad for the excuse to leave. Everyone here hates me now, and I do not blame them." She paused. "Your generator really was not that loud. I could have approved it with some simple conditions and none of this would have happened. I am sorry I made your life difficult. I am sorry things turned out this way for you," I said, and I meant it. "I never wanted to ruin your life, I just wanted to use my generator." She gave a small, sad smile. "You did not ruin my life, I did that myself. Take care, Mr. Lawson." She walked back to her car and drove away. I never saw her again. The following spring, Pinewood Heights held its first community-wide yard sale and barbecue, organized entirely through the reformed HOA. Over 300 people showed up. Kids played in the streets. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other for years had real conversations. The board members worked the grill and served food. Tyler pulled me aside at one point. "You know, none of this would have happened if you had not been stubborn about your generator." "I was just trying to keep my lights on," I said. "You did a lot more than that. You reminded people that they do not have to just accept petty tyranny. You showed them they can push back. That matters." He was right, I supposed. Sometimes standing up for yourself, even over something as simple as a generator, can ripple outward in unexpected ways. It can wake up a community that had fallen asleep under the weight of rules and restrictions that served no real purpose. My generator still sits in my backyard, enclosed in its wooden housing. It runs during power outages and for monthly tests, just as the agreement specifies. But more importantly, it serves as a reminder, at least to me, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to back down when you know you are right. The HOA operates smoothly now under Tyler's leadership. They approve reasonable requests, enforce actual safety concerns, and generally stay out of people's way unless there is a real issue. It is not perfect, no HOA ever will be, but it is a lot better than it was. As for me, I still work from home, still have my reliable power, and still live in a neighborhood I actually enjoy being part of. And every month, when I test my generator and it rumbles to life with that familiar diesel sound, I smile a little bit, remembering the look on Patricia Morrison's face when she realized she could not bully me into submission. Sometimes the little battles matter most. Sometimes a generator is not just a generator. Sometimes it is a line in the sand that says you will not be pushed around anymore. And sometimes, if you are lucky, standing on that line will inspire others to stand with you. That is what happened in Pinewood Heights. And that is why, despite everything, I am glad I bought that loud, expensive diesel generator and refused to back down when they told me I could not use it. Because the noise was not the real issue. It never is. The real issue is always about power and who gets to exercise it, and whether regular people are willing to fight back when that power is abused. We fought back. We won. And now Pinewood Heights is actually the kind of community I am proud to call home, generator and all.